Yeah. So, a sperm has a head, neck, middle piece and tail, correct? So, what are the components of the head? It contains one haploid nucleus, correct? On the top of it, there is a cap-like structure called as the acrosome. So, acrosome contains the enzymes which are essential for the fertilization of the egg, correct? What about the middle piece? What does it contain? It contains spirally arranged mitochondria which produce energy for the movement of the sperm, and the tail helps in that whiplash movement, correct? Now, how many sperms are released in a single ejaculation during coitus? 200 to 300 million sperms, out of which what percentage should have normal shape and size? 60%. And what percentage of that 60% should show vigorous motility? 40%. Understood? Right. Now, what about the gamete formation in females? What is it called, guys? Oogenesis. When does it start? Embryonic life. That means the oogenesis in the female starts even before she is born, correct? Now, in the embryo, there are about 2 million oogonia formed in each ovary, correct? And this oogonia starts meiotic division 1 and are rested at prophase 1 to form the primary oocytes. And these primary oocytes are surrounded by a single layer of cells called as the primary follicles. How many primary follicles will be there when the girl is born? Each ovary contains around 2 million follicles, correct? Now, until puberty, there is no change in the number of follicles. Is that right? No. The number of follicles will degenerate. By the time the girl reaches puberty, only 60,000 to 80,000 follicles remain in each ovary. And at the time of the puberty, one of the primary follicles become secondary follicle, then becomes tertiary, and then finally Graafian follicle, correct? So, what is the difference between the primary follicle and the secondary follicle? Increase in the number of layers of granulosa cells, and there is a formation of a new layer outside called as the theca. Then in the tertiary follicle, the theca differentiates into two layers, the theca interna and theca externa, and inside a fluid filled cavity is created which is called as a antrum filled with the fluid, right? Now, within the tertiary follicle, the primary oocyte completes its meiotic division 1 and transforms into second oocyte and a tiny cell called as the first polar body. And this secondary oocyte immediately starts the meiosis 2 and again arrested at metaphase 2, correct? Then this secondary oocyte is released as a rupture of the Graafian follicle in a process called as the ovulation. So, secondary oocyte, if there is fertilization, what happens to it, guys? Let us say there is no fertilization, secondary oocyte will degenerate. If there is fertilization, then what happens? After the entry of the sperm, the secondary oocyte completes meiotic division 2 and forms the ovum or the ootid and a small cell called as the second polar body. That means, a secondary oocyte has two destinies. One, no fertilization, degenerates. Second, if fertilization takes place, it will complete the meiosis 2. Okay? Now, what is the difference between the spermatogenesis and oogenesis? Spermatogenesis starts at puberty. Oogenesis starts in the embryonic life. In spermatogenesis, one primary spermatocyte divides to form 4 sperms. In oogenesis, one primary oocyte divides to form only one ovum. Okay? These are things you have to remember. Clear? Now, this done. This sperm, okay, good. And next one, what is the structure of the cell, guys? I mean the ovum, secondary oocyte, right? Then there is a non-cellular layer called as the zona pellucida, and outside it there is a 1 or 2 layers of the granulosa cells called as the corona radiata. Clear? Now, and the next one here is about the females, the menstrual cycle. So, what is the menstrual cycle? The cycle of events starting from one menstruation till the next is called as the menstrual cycle, which is a characteristic feature of all the female mammals like apes, monkeys and humans. And it begins at puberty and stops at, what is that? Age of 50 years, which is called as the menopause. The first menstrual cycle is the menarche, and the last menstrual cycle is the concept of last, but the stoppage is called as a menopause, right. Now, the menstrual cycle, the successive cycle occurs only if the ovum is not fertilized. If ovum is fertilized, all the events of the menstrual cycle will stop for the next 9 months. And each menstrual cycle is divided into 4 phases. What are those, guys? The menstrual phase or the bleeding phase, the luteal, the secretory or, the proliferative or the follicular phase, ovulatory phase, then the last one is luteal or the secretory phase. So, what happens in the first phase? The degeneration of the endometrium, correct? Endometrium is removed. Second phase, what is the time of the first phase? 3 to 5 days. The removed endometrium flows out through the vagina as a menstrual flow, right. Second phase, follicular phase. What happens in this phase? The primary follicle develops into Graafian follicle, and the follicle secretes a hormone called as estrogen, which will repair and reform the endometrium, correct. And the 14th day, the Graafian follicle ruptures and releases the secondary oocyte, and the 4th phase starts. What happens to the Graafian follicle? It becomes corpus luteum, which maintains the endometrium. And which hormone is responsible for the ovulation? LH. There is a peak. Can you see it, guys? This is known as the LH surge, responsible for the breakage or the rupture of the Graafian follicle. And the remains of the Graafian follicle transforms it into corpus luteum, which produces a hormone called as the progesterone. Okay? Now, so absence of menstruation may be indicative of pregnancy, correct? But it may be due to stress, poor health and poor diet. Also can cause the lack of menstruation. Are we clear about this one? Right? Now, so remember this one, guys. In all the 4 phases, the one which is fixed is luteal or the, what is it called as? Secretory. We can also call it as progesterogenic phase. Why it is called progesterogenic phase? Because during this phase, there is one peak of hormone formed. What is it called as? Progesterone. If you have a question, let us say, a woman is having a menstrual cycle of 36 days. What is the day of ovulation? Generally it's 28, 29, just giving a random number here, okay? Huh? How? See, the calculation is simple. If woman is woman is having 36 days of menstrual cycle, correct? Day of ovulation equals to number of days of menstrual cycle minus 14. Because which phase is fixed? I said this phase is fixed. Remove the 14 days. 38 minus 14, that is 24th day. Her her ovulation is on the 24th day after the starting of the bleeding phase. Understood? Are we clear about this one? Right. Now this is done. So what is the next one here, guys? The fertilization. Yeah, tell me about it. Okay. So first, during copulation, the sperms or the semen is released into the female reproductive tract, which will fertilize the egg. So what is the fertile period in humans? Which days of the menstrual cycle are considered as a fertile period? Day 10 to day 17. Okay? So if the sperm enters during that time, the fertilization is possible. Okay? You see here. During coitus, semen is released from male reproductive tract by the penis into the female reproductive tract, that is the vagina, by a process called as insemination. So what happens here? The released sperms in the vagina swims through the cervix and enter the uterus. Oocyte released into the abdominal cavity, picked up by the fimbriae and waits through the infiltrate into the ampulla region. So in the ampulla, the fertilization takes place. And the fusion of gametes is called as a syngamy or fertilization, correct? There's something mentioned here, guys. Fertilization can only occur if the ovum and sperms are transported simultaneously to the ampulla region. This is the reason why not all copulations leads to fertilization and pregnancy. The ovum has a lifespan of not more than 1 to 2 days, and the sperm once entered the female reproductive tract, its maximum lifespan is 48 to 72 hours. For the fertilization to take place, both the gametes has to reach the ampulla at the same time, only then pregnancy occurs. Now, let us say this is done. Okay. So, I think you know this one, right? The determination of sex in humans, how it is done. There are two types of sperms produced. 50% of sperm carry the X chromosome, 50% of sperms carry the Y chromosome, right? Who took this one? Okay. Yeah. So, 50% of sperms carry the X chromosome, 50% of sperms carry the Y chromosome. So, who determines the gender of the fetus? The man, correct? How? If X chromosome containing sperm fertilize the egg, the resulting fetus will be a female. If Y carrying sperm fertilize the egg, then the resulting child will be male. So, it is scientifically correct to say that it is the man who is responsible for the gender, not the female. Clear now? Right. Next, what happens after fertilization, guys? Tell me. There is a process called as cleavage. What happens there? After the formation of the diploid zygote, within 24 hours, the zygote divides to form 2 cells, then 4, then 8, then 16. And these cells are called as the blastomeres. And the 8 to 16 cell stage is called as the morula. And morula transforms into something called as blastocyst. What is the difference between blastocyst and the morula? Morula is just a mass of cells, whereas the blastocyst is a proper structure where some cells form an outer layer, correct, and some cells form a conical mass inside, which is called as the inner cell mass. The outer layer is called as the trophoblast. Now, this blastocyst attaches to the uterine wall and rapidly divide. The uterine cells will rapidly divide and close the blastocyst into the endometrium, which is called as the implantation. I mean, literally we can say the entire blastocyst gets buried into the endometrium, that is called as the implantation. So, once implantation is done, which happens around day 11 to day 15 after fertilization, then the pregnancy is confirmed because the placenta will start forming. And the placenta here, what is placenta exactly, guys? After the implantation, the trophoblast form a finger-like projections called as the chorionic villi, right? And the maternal tissue also interdigitate with the chorionic villi to form a functional connection between the mother and the fetus, and that is called as the placenta. What is the function of placenta? To provide oxygen and nutrients to the fetus and remove the carbon dioxide and the wastes. At the same time, the placenta secretes 4 important hormones. What are those, guys? HCG, HPL, estrogen and progesterone. Remember, HCG, HPL are produced only during the pregnancy. And at the end of the pregnancy, there is one more hormone produced by the ovaries. What is it called as? Relaxin, that helps in the parturition. Correct? Now, after the implantation, the blastomeres, the inner cell mass, differentiates into 3 layers. First ectoderm, second endoderm, and third one is mesoderm. This is sequence: ectoderm, endoderm, and then mesoderm. So, all these 3 layers are responsible to form every tissue, every organ of the fetus. And what are the changes that you notice during gestation? Tell me, guys. So, average duration of pregnancy in humans is, how much is it, guys? 9 months. So we didn't discuss the mammary glands, right? Okay, it's pending. So this is other animals. By the first month, or the 4 weeks, the heart of the fetus is formed, and we can what to say, the sign of the growing fetus can be noticed by listening to the heartbeat of the fetus by a stethoscope. And by second month, 8 weeks, the fetus develops limbs and digits. By the end of first trimester, and the first 3 months, most of the major organ systems are formed, for example, limbs and external genitalia. And by the 5th month, first movements of the fetus and the appearance of the hair on the head. By the 6th month, you can say the body is covered with fine hair, eyelashes are formed, eyelids will separate. By the end of the 3rd trimester or the 9th month, the fetus is fully developed and ready for the delivery. Okay? These are about the changes happen during the 9 months. And next part here is a parturition. What is meant by parturition? The process of the childbirth, right? So, once the fetus is developed, it will signal the mother that it is ready to come out. That means the signals of parturition originate from the fully developed fetus along with the fetus, and they cause mild contractions of the uterus, which is called as a fetal ejection reflex. In response to this fetal ejection reflex, the mother's hypothalamus releases a hormone called as a oxytocin, which will cause strong uterine contractions. And more contractions initiate or stimulate hypothalamus to release more oxytocin. So, this is a cycle, a positive feedback. More contractions, more oxytocin. More oxytocin means more contraction. So, as the time goes by, the number of contractions per unit of time will slowly decrease, will increase. So, finally comes a time where the baby is expelled out through the birth canal, which is called as a parturition, and after the delivery of the baby, the entire placenta will be removed, which is called as the stage after birth or the placental stage. Understood? So, the hormones you have to remember here. Which one is called as the hormone of birth? Oxytocin. Which hormone is called as the hormone of pregnancy? Progesterone. Which hormone is called as the hormone of lactation? Prolactin. It's called as a prolactin. Okay, I'll come to that point. You see. So, this is about the mammary glands. Functional mammary glands is a characteristic feature of all the female mammals, and the paired structures called the breasts contain variable amount of fat as well as the glandular tissue. And generally the the breast attached to the outer thoracic wall through a muscle. This muscle is called as a pectoralis major. And the glandular tissue in each mammary gland is divided into 15 to 20 mammary lobes, and each lobe is made up of clusters of cells called as a, what are they called guys? Alveoli, which produce and store the milk. And alveoli, the milk is ejected out of the alveoli through small ducts called as a mammary tubules, which will converge to form the mammary ducts, and many of these mammary ducts join to form the, can you see at the near the nipple, you can see this enlarged areas. Can you see this, these enlarged areas? They are called as a mammary ampulla, and the small ducts that opens out to the nipple, they are called as a, what are they called? Lactiferous ducts, through which the milk is sucked out by the fetus, for the baby. Understood? The pathway is very important. Alveoli, mammary tubules, mammary ducts, mammary ampulla, and lactiferous ducts. Clear? Is safe. So, mammary glands undergo differentiation during pregnancy, and they start producing milk after the childbirth, which helps the mother to feed the newborn by a process called as the lactation. Correct? And the milk which is produced during the initial few days of lactation is called as a colostrum, which contains several antibodies. What are those antibodies? IgA. which is absolutely essential to develop resistance for the newborn babies, because it takes time for the newborn baby to develop their full potential immune system. And breastfeeding during the initial period of infant growth is recommended by doctors for bringing up a healthy baby. This is called as the lactation. Okay? Any doubts about this one? This is the chapter human reproduction. Next class we will discuss the reproductive health. Okay? Now solve the questions. We still have time. Solve the questions.